these words to swallow. From your torrential clouds they're raining. Until you're falling for me, you're falling for me. You twist around a bit, but not for long. 'Cause you'll be falling for me, falling for me. I'm standing on the edge, but not for long. 'Cause you'll be falling for.
All right, we're live. We got a special guest in the house. There's multiple episodes coming out. You've seen the branding. You guys got your own social media branding. This is the duel coming up. There's multiple locations, and there's been a lot of talk about this specific this video series, these docu-series, and the word's kind of getting out that it's actually going to be happening. So Gibbons, the guy behind it, we appreciate you coming in the show and talking to us a little bit about it. But I mean, I know this has been a long process for you guys, so I think talking with Adam, we really kind of wanted just to talk with you just about this wasn't easy to get done, and the excitement is building, and it's finally here that people are going to start seeing a little bit more history of the specific duel and just the history of our sport, right? I think that's important. So thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thank you, Tony. So I guess what I can add to what you're saying here is that we did a 6-part docu-series on the 86 duel between Iowa and Iowa State, and we look at this as kind of a time capsule. We interviewed 17 of the 20 guys that were in this thing, and the significance of this duel is that we had 12 guys in this duel that won 16 national titles in their career. We had 29 NCAA finalist performances between these teams with the guys in their career. So 44 All-Americans, 11 guys from the state of Iowa that won 24 Iowa State titles. So it's very Iowa-centric in that way. But, basically taking a piece of worn-out, disintegrating public television footage and doing something that's really never been done in the sport before, a docu-series like this, and a little bit like the Last Dance, and we go into a lot of different storylines after it's not what people think it is. But my good friend John Myers from California, that he's not really from California, he's from Eagle Grove. He grew up in Eagle Grove, Iowa, which we know is one of the cradles of wrestling civilization in the state of Iowa. Grew up there as a high school wrestler, wrestled for Nebraska during this time period. And during COVID, he was out in L.A., where he's been for the last 30 plus years. During COVID, he ended up going down some rabbit hole. He only needs about 4 hours of sleep. And he called me up, and I was building my house in Johnston, Iowa, standing on the roof. I took his call. We probably talked 4 or 5 times a week. A great friend of mine, one of those guys I bounce off all my stuff I do on wrestling media and all that stuff. And I think we've become very close friends over the years. We met through my old college roommate, Kelly Ward, who was a national champion at Iowa State. Kelly coached him at Nebraska and was great friends after that. So we had a lot of commonality. So we've been very close for the last 25 years. And he called me up and says, hey, I've been watching this duel between Iowa and Iowa State in 1986, and this is one of the most dramatic things I've ever seen. And for me, for our team and all that stuff, we won the duel. This down a little bit after going in. Didn't have a lot of things figured out as a staff, and also just our performances. Had a couple number 2 seeds that didn't place in the tournament at all, and didn't have our best effort. And so in some ways it was kind of a burning memory about really how we performed after that duel, because we had beat a couple of their eventual national champions in the meet and won the duel. But looking back at it, just thought that for a second there that this was one of the more significant teams for me personally. It was my first team that I'd coached in '86, where I had total control of what was going on, and they meant so much to me personally as to when you're 26 years old and you're head coach at Iowa State and taking on a major program, it's important that you get off to a great start. Well, we were 19-1 in duels that year, finished 4th in the country, and even though we didn't have the national tournament that we had, the fact that we beat Iowa in a dual meet on public television in front of a statewide television audience kind of got people thinking that this was the right decision, and we followed it up the next year with the national title. But a lot of that expectations were set from the work that we did. These guys totally bought into what we were trying to do there. Brought in Ed Bannock as our assistant coach. We had great guys that were in our program, Wayne Cole, Kevin Darkus, just great people. And we just ended up going out there and doing our best. But we had such high expectations. We told these guys at the beginning of the year that we are going to win in Iowa City. We're going to stop the streak, all right? Streak's going to stop at 8, all right? Well, it didn't quite turn out that way, but we decided at that moment, and I knew how much work this might be, and so I told John, and he was thinking, well, maybe we'll interview 3 or 4 guys. I go, well, we're gonna do this. We're gonna talk to everybody, all right? So, and he called my bluff. He goes, okay, we'll talk to everybody, all right? And he was so locked in on this project, and that's what we ended up doing. We ended up talking to, the assistant coaches, Mark Johnson for Iowa and Ed Bannock. We brought in Chuck Patton, who was the color commentator for Iowa Public Television. He and Doug Brown had great chemistry together, and there's just so many storylines on this time capsule. And and after we did all the interviews and all that, there storylines developed. We didn't really know exactly where we were going to go with this. We obviously wanted to tell the story of the competition, but it ended up morphing into something quite a bit different. And there's after the last hand raise, there's probably about 11 different storylines that develop after this, and it's pretty cool to be part of.
Yeah, I mean, when you guys you talk just about how significant these team members were, to you just personally and just to this day, right? Did you go to them? I mean, how do you guys go about interviewing every single person? With your busy life, there's lots of stuff going on.
Well, there was, and I was building a house at the time, and but we ended up, for the most part, these were one-call closes, and I think that probably has a lot to, hopefully, it has a lot to do with the trusting relationship I had with guys on both sides. Through my broadcasting career, I got to know obviously guys like Jim Heffernan and Brad Penrith and Dwayne Goldman. These guys had extensive college coaching careers, and but even guys like Matt Eglin, who I just tipped my cap to showing up and spending time with us on this. And 9 of the guys that got beat, all right, interviewed with us, and they were fantastic. And I was, after going through the interview process, we did 4,000 minutes worth of interviews. We interviewed Phil Henning, who was the referee that night, and who was, by the way, in 1970 was a runner-up. It talks about Gable getting beat. Well, Phil Henning got beat as the NCAA runner-up that year in 1970 at McGaw Hall and Northwestern. So he was there. He got beat by Jason Smith from Iowa State. It was Iowa State back then. So he had a distinguished career at the University of Iowa, and he was a referee, great referee. Did a lot of big meets here in Iowa State UNI. So we interviewed him. We interviewed the Sports Illustrated writer, who ended up being, actually it was his first break to get to write with Sports Illustrated, Ivan Maisel. Ivan Maisel has had a career at Sports Illustrated. He ended up being on the College Football 150 episode for, he you've seen that big thing where they sit around the panel and talk about the history of college football. Well, he's the guy with the Alabama drawl accent, and he's had a great career with ESPN.com and also with Sports Illustrated. But his memories of the meet were pretty significant too. You know, he was a young sports writer, 26-year-old. We were both the same age. You know, so I remember going out with him, and you know, back then, you know, didn't have the internet. You didn't have all that media presence.
Yeah.
Sports Illustrated was it. And this meet was featured on the Larry Bird cover, right? And Larry Bird, the Larry Bird cover is what the most bought, you know, is the largest episode edition, or what the word is there, but that the Sports Illustrated has ever had. And we're on the table of contents. Our dual meet is. And the picture that you see from our poster, right here is with me is right out of Sports Illustrated. So it had a lot of coverage, but this was a young, aspiring guy that wanted to go ahead and move on from being a fact checker to being a quality writer, and this was his first break.
Yeah, wrestling is always just like people that don't know wrestling, but they grew up in the journalist. You know, they grow up just like wanting to be a journalist, right? And they get, oh, hey, you're going to be on the wrestling beat, and it takes a little bit of time just to just kind of figure out how crazy people are in wrestling, and then you kind of get them suckered in. That's what I've seen anyways. As a wrestling person, it was easy for me, and I wasn't a journalist, but like, you know,
You talk about making the calls. Who made the call? Who made the call to Gable, and what was the pitch to Gable to get him involved?
Well, Dan and I spent a lot of time together with doing broadcasts together, and I think really once he realized the significance, and he came there with a lot to say, and he was ready. We actually filmed him in he and I sat down together and in my brother's barn, right? And if you've ever been to my brother's barn, you know it looks like it's designed for animals, but it's really designed for a party, right? So, but my brother Joe, he was the host of it there, and so you know he and Kevin Dresser sat down together. The juxtaposition of Kevin now being the coach at Iowa State and Joe, the returning national champion, is a big match for him. But also Gable and I sat down together. So those were the first interviews that we did, and I think that we have Dan in a way that not a lot of people have seen him, particularly in the beginning of this. People who've been coached by him will understand that that's him. But it's a unique look at Coach Gable. And when you think about it, you know, obviously people look up the history of this, but this is the 9 in a row, right? And that was in jeopardy, right, after we beat him in the duel, and it ends up being about going into the really kind of the magic that Gable had, and both teams, both programs. You know, it's funny because it's the duel, well, it's not a tri meet, it's not a quad, right? It's the duel. The duel is the two programs, the two cultures. They both feed off of each other, and it's not a duel, right? Well, it's a duel meet. Well, no, we're not. We're not sabers, or we're not pistols, or whatever. We're not trying to kill each other, right? It's the two, right? Two teams are going out there. And it's kind of the double entendre of, that's why we call it the duel. Is that it's just that it's the two, and you can see, differences, and like in the first episode, we spend a lot of time kind of developing, where we all came from, how we all knew each other, and that type of thing, and you see a lot of that all the way through, because a lot of these guys grew up together. We knew about each other. The Kistler family in Riverside, California. Well, we saw those guys when I was 7th grade, 8th grade up in Missoula, Montana, right? Wrestled Marty's older brothers, right? And guys like Jeff Kerber, and going up there we used to travel the country. They're wrestling the best people in the world, and our dads got to know the Kistler's dads, so there's a lot of commonality, all right, that was happening all the way through this. I remember as a college wrestler going to Colorado Springs and being in a wrestling room, and a young Dwayne Goldman came to work out with us at 138 pounds or whatever he was, and I was the 34-pounder, and I was, I rolled around with him a little bit, back then. So it's amazing all the threads that we couldn't even begin to talk about, even after this duel. Dwayne Goldman his son was coached by Perry Summit, the R18 pounder, who went back to Indiana and coached. So there's just a lot of threads all the way through this. A lot of them we couldn't even get to all of them, but we had 4,000 minutes worth of interviews. We felt pretty strongly that the content needed to be, longer, and that's where we got to the 6 episodes. So it's really 5 episodes about the wrestling, and then the 6th episode is about 36 minutes. It's my favorite because nobody gets beat. I mean, it was so cool to go see these guys in their element, reconnect, particularly with a lot of guys that I'd coached, and spend a little time with their wives and all that. That's just the people that are around them. Of course, both my brothers were in the meet, and so we just had, we just knew all these guys. But even guys like I said, the guys that like Mark Singlinger in this thing, you can't believe the amazing career that he had. Right, as a college athlete, he was the 2-time Big Ten lineman of the year, and he was also a 2-time All-American. And he's 6 weeks off of the Rose Bowl, starting in the Rose Bowl for Iowa, and he's thrown into this dual meet. Probably certainly wasn't his best performance and all that stuff, but he spent the time to talk to us, and I can't thank the guys that showed up and got on camera enough. And I'm sure it was, in some ways it was somewhat cathartic for a lot of them, particularly maybe Matt Eglin, who spent time talking with us. But Matt's in every episode. It was a rough time for him, and but I was, as I said, I'm dominating the conversation here. But
no, you're good. I think where Fellas was, when you call Dan Gable to be a part of this, obviously it wasn't the end story of, we see Dan, and when he's portrayed, obviously in wrestling, everything is winning, and Owens gets brought up every once in a while. But I think it's intriguing that you say, you're going to see Dan in a different light. So I think that question is like, probably not a thing that he's been comfortable or used to being talking about as the bad parts, I guess, of his career, right?
From a viewer standpoint, I think there's some real nuggets in here. If you're a viewer, if you really listen and pay attention, it's probably one of the most vulnerable times you'll see Coach Gable. Almost like it's like a cleansing period for him. Like, he verbalized a lot of things that if you're a coach or you're leading young men in the sport or anything in life that you can really hone in on if you listen to what he's saying. Basically he come to the grips of that winning. Whatever was going on, they always end up winning anyway. So, maybe the details or how he was going about it wasn't the right way to do it, and it didn't matter because at that point they went on that year. Even though they lost the duel, they still went on to win their 9th in a row, right? And you can see like the reflection period about his choices. He talks about just overall how he needed to change his lifestyle as a human being to be a dad and a father. So it's really intriguing from a viewer standpoint or a fan of sport, especially someone that puts Gable at such a high level, to see him open up and be that vulnerable for you as a viewer, to see, even though he's viewed as invincible in a lot of people's eyes, he still has the same feelings as everybody else.
Yeah.
He still had weaknesses to overcome. It wasn't just easy. Talk about the Gable magic. It's pretty intriguing.
I think he was willing to go there, and it didn't. He had, I think, a lot, like you say, maybe a lot on his heart at that point in time, and it's kind of funny because Iowa fans that we've kind of screened this with get visibly uncomfortable when they watch Gable in the beginning of this thing, and Dan asked me one time, he says, "Well, what's this really about?" I says, "Well," he says, "you do a great job of knocking yourself off your own pedestal in the first episode, and the rest of it, your team, myself, so part of my team, put you back on your pedestal where you belong." And it's again, why is this significant? Again, the talent that was out there, the credentialed guys that were out there, as far as NCAA credentials, I think is difficult to match. The fact that we have the footage of the meet, and the wrestling was good, right? There's no question about it. These guys were going at it, and it just speaks to that era. And why is Dan Gable always going to be significant? Is I think one of the reasons is because of 9 in a row, and that we give you a very clear look at what was happening inside the program at that point in time. And we don't have a narrator. We didn't really actually know where this was going to go until we edited the footage. And there's some guys that pop out on this thing that end up. And Chuck Patton is great as far as helping us out. Our color commentator, who also had a wonderful career, was a national champion coach at the college level with UNI, and just a great guy, and still alive, still vibrant. We caught him on the golf course. And I'm wandering here a little bit, but we caught these guys. This isn't, folding chairs in front of wall mats, as I always say.
Yeah.
All right. This
Typical interview.
Yeah. We went to Chuck Patton's golf course, where he serves as a ranger and basically golfs every day in Seattle. Right. We filmed him in the rain because it rains in Seattle.
Yeah.
Right. So Mike Van Arsdale in Arizona. Dwayne Goldman with Pikes Peak in the background. Well, because that's where he lives. He looks out their backyard and at his dad's Hank's place, and there's Pikes Peak in the background. Tim Krieger was at the shooting range at Colorado Springs, where his daughter was, at the time Olympic hopeful, trying to make a world team here. Was in skeet shooting and trap shooting. So. We went to where all these guys were. My brother's barn, my brother's office. Greg Randall at the Memorial Union in Iowa City. Matt Eglin with the Iowa River in the background, and who can't? Everybody who's been to Iowa City knows where the power plant is. It's all painted that rustic brown primer color. So it was fun going out and seeing these guys. It was a great trip. John and I, we enjoyed each other's company, but it was just that battle to get all this footage in, and then the editing process begins, and where do you want to go? But our whole thing was fun and cool, right? We want to be that this got to be fun and it's got to be cool, because I really believe that wrestling is cool and it's fun. There's so many things that happen when you're on a team. The things that you end up cutting up on each other or whatever. It's just being part of being part of a team. And I told you this earlier, Tony. I had a good friend of mine, Adam Darengowski, had coached with me for a year. He was from Ryder. He finished 3rd place. I think Chad Zapital was in that weight class. Prescott may have been the national champion that year, but he ended up being 3rd in the country. And he told me after watching this, we had him screen it because we were looking for input from people who been in Iowa but been out of state, and said, what do you think? Does this thing have a wider audience beyond the state of Iowa? And he goes, Jim, he says, I would gladly give up my 3rd place medal, all right, to have wrestled on one of these teams.
That's a great segue, because my next question was going to be, you think about the state of Iowa, like the prestige. People talk about Iowa wrestling, the tradition of the state of Iowa. Majority of these guys that wrestle in the duel, the coaches in the duel, are still seen today as legends, icons of the sport. They're recognized. What history and what importance did the public viewing of IPTV have for not just only wrestling, but continue building the base and foundation of wrestling in the state of Iowa?
Well, I think we try to make public television ends up being a character in this story.
Yes.
We spent 9 minutes in this in the first episode laying the foundation. So in the first episode, you're always laying the foundation, for the storylines that end up happening. And I've learned a lot about this. It goes, what do you have? What is being? I'll come back to your point here, but what does an executive director do? All right. Well, you make a lot of phone calls. You get people. Hey, will you show up? Will you talk to us? There was a lot of. And it turned into a more exacerbating role when we were trying to basically get the rights to this. But the thought, we wanted to make sure that people knew how important public television was to wrestling, and they're a character in this story with the work that Doug Brown, who's deceased, and now and Chuck Patton, was great to have him on here. But we spend 9 minutes in this thing paying homage to what, you're viewing the stations of Iowa Public Television. Yeah. The whole thing, what they did for our sport. And the reason why they can't do this in Oklahoma or they can't do it in Pennsylvania or whatever, tell these stories, because they don't have this footage. And that's what we had, and that's why we're making an effort to see that, hey, this is what great storytelling can do with your footage. Let's go out there and tell a great story. But we started right at the top with the year that Gable won the 9 in a row, and we beat him in a duel. So it was cool.
A better way to put it, how important was the at that time Iowa State wrestled 2 times a year. There was maybe like 6 to 8 duels total, maybe on IPTV.
13 sometimes.
Okay, 13.
Yeah.
How much of that those live streams, even if they're dated a little bit, time released, how important was that to driving involvement for the state of Iowa for kids to aspire and overall tradition of the sport? I guess is what I'm trying to get to.
Well,
like if you didn't have these duels on at that time on public television, me being a 5 at the time watching the duel, right? Would the state of Iowa still have a level of importance of a wrestling, or do you think this drove a huge trajectory for the state where it is today for the following of wrestling?
Well, think about this for a second, okay? Tom Brands was a junior in high school. I talked to him a couple days earlier this week about this. He grew up watching these things. The Brands boys, every other guy that wanted to become a state champion or eventual national champion, Olympic champion, whatever your goals, they were tuned into this, okay? The footage would get out and go to other states and all that stuff. They got a chance to watch some of the best wrestling. And in this meet, you have, 15 of the last 17 national championships were won by these 2 teams.
Yes.
And it ended up being 17 out of 19. Now, I've done a lot of thinking about this, but one of the most significant things that happened in the state of Iowa we don't really recognize was the Iowa State team in 1965, led by Tom Peckham from Cresco, Iowa. They end up winning the national title and 15 years worth of dominance from the UNI win in 1950, right, to 1965. So we'll say that's 15-year period here that they stopped that Oklahoma string, right? Oklahoma and Oklahoma State each won it one more time, right, after that. And then it was basically Iowa State and Iowa up until really 1988 when Bobby Douglas's team, and there was a 4-year period there were 2 Oklahoma State titles, Arizona State, the 3-year period. But for that period, the state of Iowa dominated college wrestling. The new technology then, the seminal event was the coaching of Gable, right? Not only the effort and of being a teammate at Iowa State and help changing the culture there, but there was Tom Peckham there and that foundation of that 65 team that wrestled things away. And in 66, Iowa State hosted the NCAAs, which I was a little kid then. I remember going to it as a little kid, not remembering much about what I saw, but at least laid eyes on it. And, all the way, you take that all the way to, at that time, that's, again, set from 1970, and then from 1977 through 87, that was 10 years in a row right there. It was either Iowa or Iowa State. So, yeah, I mean, and then you think about it, Iowa had, I don't know how many, year after year, 5 Iowans on the team. Year when we won nationals, right? We had 6 Iowans on the team. And, it wasn't just so much it was just Iowans. It was just that they came in to be part of these cultures, right? Which were a little bit different in a lot of ways. By this time, Gable was a much more, he's probably 36, 37 years old at the time, and he's really got it going. Everything about that program. I mean, think about it, 8 in a row, and they're going for 9, and they've got that team that they had there, and they ended up having 5 NCAA champions and a finalist with 8 guys. And you look at the 2 guys who didn't win, right, or weren't it, Rico and Royce. They both end up being national champions later. Royce the next year, Rico 2 years later, and actually Rico the next year, right, because he wanted that both of them were national champions the next year. You take a look at they set the point spread differential between first and second was still the record 72 points. It's amazing. I mean, it's and this is, there wasn't a lot of transferring going back then. The guys that transfer were guys that had drop programs. So a lot of this was, developed, recruited and developed, and you just didn't move around the way you see it today.
Well, I heard.
I don't know if I answered your question
you did.
there. But
I heard a recent interview. I mean, I think Tom said maybe in the Big Ten thing, there's a couple things you were late for, like church, something else, and IPTV, like he was never late for. And then I heard Dwight Henson, who was on an interview on your platform recently, talk about when he was being recruited. He was about dead set on going to Arizona State with Bobby Douglas. Bobby Douglas was going to Iowa State. And one of the biggest pulls for him coming to Iowa State was he had to wrestle on TV. So, like, when you look at I think it's important in anything that you like or appreciate or you follow, like, to really understand the history of things. And I think both programs, what this duel encompasses for me is gives you such a insight to how things got where they were today and why the duel coming up, why every year, no matter if it's in Iowa City or Ames, why is it sold out? Why is it so important? Well, there's going to be stars to be on display, right? All these guys are superheroes, in most people's view. There's going to be guys at the top get knocked off, and there's going to be new emerging stars, come to light. And
every year. So the thing that's also significant is that, okay, Iowa leads the nation in attendance, okay, and Iowa State, who hasn't been haven't been in the top 10 in I don't know how long, we're third, okay. We're still putting fannies in the seats. Both schools are, and so even with everything else, and even with things that are, even how things have been rough at Iowa State, and Coach Dresser's trying to bring that back up. But you've got to do it in front of people, and it makes such a big difference when you're wrestling a team. Even if I remember commenting to Ed Bannock when we were at Hilton and we're in the lineups and look up at the crowd, and maybe half of them were Iowa fans, right? And there's 13,000 people, whatever the number was. I mean, but that's the way it was. I mean, it's been easy to be an Iowa wrestling fan, a little bit more difficult to be an Iowa State wrestling fan, but at the same time, the people have shown up and have measured pretty well in these attendance records, which has been pretty impressive that that wrestling staff at Iowa State's been able to do that.
You pointed on earlier about the 10 national titles. I would say one thing that is maybe, like, this may sound a little bit odd, but one thing that actually would help both I think one thing that would help Iowa's maybe perform higher, and obviously Iowa State is, what's the quote? Rising ship raises all tides. So if Iowa State's pushing Iowa every year, there hasn't been, I don't think, like 18 or 19 in a row. I don't think Tom's lost Iowa State since he's been there, right?
No.
There's been some close duels.
Very.
But that competition between those two schools naturally raises the level of both to perform higher, obviously. And I think that in-state rivalry, the hotter it gets and the more contention it gets, ultimately is going to make both programs win.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's different now is that I agree with you. The rising tide lifts all boats. Okay, so that's good. But I think Tom Brands is there to think about Iowa, right? And Kevin Dresser is there to think about Iowa State. The thing that you maybe we had back then that you don't have now because there's fewer Iowa kids that make the lineup, okay, at these programs. You don't have the commonality of the 11 guys that grew up in the same era, wrestling each other, weekend freestyle tournaments, training with each other. That's starting to come back, as I sense here with the amount of kids with the club wrestling, and they're getting to know each other. And guys are going their separate ways in college, just like they did back then. But that we would. I knew Randy Lewis since I was in junior high, right? And so it was real easy when we were in college to go ahead and not be intimidated and spend time with each other. I don't think there's any of that going on now.
It's very siloed.
Yeah. So it's very siloed, and it's unfortunate in some ways, but it's just the way it is. And a lot of it's because there's fewer Iowans in the lineup. And I think if we're here at IA Wrestle or whatever, a lot of Iowa kids are going to see this. They aspire to be in one of these meets. And I'm going to tell you what, I've got my rear end kicked in these things, and I've had matches where they've gone my way and all that stuff. And there's nothing better. There's nothing that gets you ready. By the time you've wrestled in one of these meets, the national finals is it's not even the pressure's not even there. It really isn't.
One thing you said about wrestling, and it's kind of funny. I remember asking Tom Brands one time about he wrestled Dan Knight, and I said, "Man, you really gave it to him going out. He kind of got a bounce hard." He goes, "Here's what Tom said. Just what you said." He goes, "I owed him. He tech falled me in freestyle state."
Yeah.
So like you still had that competition.
Oh yeah.
And previous, so that rivalry continued, like the continuance. I'm gonna ask you a question. It's kind of off the not in the documentary, but kind of personal. Is so you're 26 years old. You guys, young up and coming coach wants to be at the best. Has already performed the best as an athlete. You lose less than 30 days later. Previous 25-9 to Iowa. Okay. Harold Nichols is in attendance. Okay.
Both Gable and my coach.
Yes. Okay. You're coming out before the meet, kind of a before and after. What were you thinking going into this meet? And their interview, like a lot of people think they can win. You thought you and your team were ready to win in the interview, right?
Oh yeah.
So what were you thinking before? Okay. And then after you left, after the conclusion of the dual meet, where was your head then? You talk about like we didn't perform in the NCAA tournament. Was there some sense of fulfillment that you had kind of done something that you maybe had set out to maybe?
No, I think no, because we were from the beginning. So I'm a really big believer in you set those high goals, and I told somebody tried to contact me on social media or whatever. Why did you get out of wrestling, or why did you get out of coaching? Also, I knew from the beginning, all right, that I wanted to experience a lot of things professionally. Okay, all right, so. When I got the job at Iowa State, I said I'm going to go 10 years or a national championship. Okay, and so everything I thought about with regard to how can I, we had some good guys. So I knew they were good. All right, and then we brought Ed Banks. So we had some guys that were already there that were, they were doing a lot of the things it took to become really good. And I was a assistant wrestling coach at the time. I was a recruiting coordinator, so I got to know a lot of these guys from in a lot of different angles, and I did all the training. And when I got the job, it was a shock to a lot of people. It wasn't a shock to anybody necessarily in the program. And so to answer your question, at that specific time, I was just living it. I remember my skin breaking out and all that stuff. I'd have nervous reactions to. I was so focused on, a lot of things I couldn't control, right? But I was so geared towards that because I remember being at Iowa State, and the guys that won the national championship in '77, they said, it's the best feeling that you're going to have. I've won national titles, but, winning national championship as a team I took that to heart, right? And I didn't experience that at Iowa State. And, heck, I think that in '82, if we could have turned back the hand of the time of both Joe and I winning the semis, and Mike Mann maybe wins, and we joined Nate as national champions, we could have won that thing. You still think about the ones that got away and all that stuff, and I probably would have had a little bit more fulfilling career, and probably maybe not even considered coaching at that time. But it drove me to levels that I really want, and I wanted to bring in that delusional confidence that you need, and I needed, all right, to become a a national champion. I had to take out the guy that made the Olympic team, right? And I had to close the gap, right? And beat a guy that made the finals 4 times, right? It beat me 16-6 in the duel that year. Well, you know, where do you drive your confidence from that?
Yeah.
You got to be a little bit delusional. Well, I believed that. I felt that if we told our goals, and Eddie was perfect for that. All right, Ed Bannock was like, you know, he had he thought that this, you know, this set of glasses could win a national championship because he coached it, you know, and he had that type of undying belief in these guys. All right, and we kind of lived that, and we set that goal to win a national title now. Right. No, we didn't give ourselves a runway or anything like that. We want to do it now. We wanted to go over to Iowa City and win now. So when we went over there and, you know, when we won the duel and we talked about from the beginning that we were going to taper off a little bit at the end of the season, and it just ended up being the worst thing to do for a few of our guys, and we lost focus, I think, a little bit, and I put that on me because Chris Campbell's the one that trained me at Iowa State. And I took over. We went back to doing a lot of things that Chris Campbell had done at the end of the season, keeping the level high. You know, Eddie was in agreement with it. We just changed things up. And actually, the next 6 years that I coached, I always felt that we had good performances. You know, and I tell people this is that how do you judge whether you're doing the right thing in the program? Well, I counted as your winning percentage on Saturday. You know, Sean Bormet. Got in a conversation with him the other day, a couple years ago, when he first got the job. I says, keep track of your winning percentage on Saturday. Why is that important? Well, you don't have to. So, not everybody's going to be in the finals. You're going to be in the wrestlebacks. You're wrestling for your program, your coaches. You know, your goals may be shattered, but you got to go out there and keep it going and wrestle for your program. I had a lot of guys that finished their careers with wins at the end and third place finishes and all that. Just as proud as those as they have the national championships. But there's no preparation for a 3-day tournament, particularly when you travel on Monday and Tuesday. You're actually you're in the game for 5 days. Well, you can't replicate that, okay, during the course of the season. And some guys are worn out by the time they get to Friday morning, and that's why you see so many upsets in the quarters. I just felt that was the focus that we need to keep is to go back, and we lost our focus a little bit, and I took responsibility for that, but you just can't go back. I mean, some guys were seniors and some guys never had a chance to wrestle again or whatever. It's not like we totally fell off but we felt that we could have been better. We could have been the team that we were in Hilton Coliseum that night. We just weren't at that tournament, and we had a lot of things to correct. But the other thing too, that and this is why it was so kind of tough to be involved with from my standpoint of kind of because I was engaged, I was involved, and you're in it, but you're also putting it together. But one of the questions I asked myself, well, who else is going to be able to tell this story? Who else can bring everybody together? Who else can go ahead and do this efficiently and get the people to trust them to go ahead and do this? And so I said, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to wear this hat. But as far as being somebody who was in it, after not winning the national championship that year and finishing fourth, we were in a hotel room. You have a party afterwards, and we spent about 45 minutes in a hotel room, and I just, I go, I don't know what happened, but I'm going to figure it out. I feel like I've let you guys down. We were so much better than that, and it got, guys crying, and I knew they cared. All right, I look back at that and I go, man, such a tough opportunity to lose, because you have very, very few times do you have teams. I probably had 3 teams that could win national titles. They were actually one of them in my mind, right? But the next year we had a team that could win, and we obviously had one in '88 that could have won as well. But you know, as a coach, you get very few opportunities to you know, really run one up the flagpole here. And we kind of missed on that. But I knew they cared, all right? That's the one thing about it. I knew they cared, all right? So we didn't have to say, we visited about it that night. No finger pointing, no this or that, but it's just, I just told him, he says, we are going to be so much better next year. We're just going to, we're going to do it. We still have that unbridled belief. But the following year, there were no pep talks. There were no, you know, there wasn't any loss of faith if we didn't do well. We got beat 4 times in duels, but we never lost more than 5 matches in a duel. All right, we were going in places like Penn State, Arizona State, Oklahoma State, Iowa. You know, won 5 matches in each gym. Right, did a lot of away wrestling out there. It made us tougher, and you know, we were ready to go the next year.
So do you think the '87 national tournament happens on 2 fronts? With number one, how much, you know, you actually beating Iowa that year, right? What kind of belief did that put into you had a unwavering belief that your guys could win, and Coach Bannock did too. Did that put a burst of belief in your program and the people coming in, and the faltering or as your part underperforming at 86, you know, then you're going into the duel meet. You said you lost 4 duels.
Yeah.
Did you beat Iowa that year?
Yeah, we beat them in the first one.
Okay, so you already, there's a repeat. You guys were, I think, ranked 4th going into the 87, and you had, I think you won by 12 or 15 points. 25. Okay, so 4th place or 4th ranked.
I don't know how I remember that.
Well, I would remember it too. Does I guess that without the ups and downs of 86, does 87 happen like that?
Well, there weren't many downs in '86 except for the end. We were 19-1 in duels, right? We wanted to find out that night whether we were the team that was not going to heck out of North Carolina and Oklahoma and Oklahoma State and you know, you and I.
But you still weren't picked to win, right?
Well, the next year we weren't picked to win.
That's what I'm saying, though. So I'm saying you weren't picked to win in
There
'86.
weren't many downs.
The downs, I'm talking about the performance of the NCAA tournament, right?
Yeah,
You
right.
had the ups of beating them at the duel, which I don't know when the last time happened.
Can I interrupt you for a second? We're 2 years away from Tommy Chesbro, all right, in '84, losing his job, right? He beats Iowa in the duel and doesn't beat Iowa to stop the streak.
Yeah.
All right. In '84, and that's the team that had Mark Perry Sr. on it and all that stuff. And they John was on that team. I think they beat Iowa pretty handily. Maybe I don't know if John was on that team or not.
Yeah, beat Jerzino.
Yeah, but anyway, so Tommy lost his job at Oklahoma State. All right, he's the coach of the year, finished the 2nd in the country, and nationals are in. Maybe I can't remember, but we were not too far away from that. So I'm just thinking to myself, I ain't freaking gonna be in this gig too long, taking a number 2 team and finishing 4th. All right, you got to remember our you weren't going to get anything past our alumni either. I mean, those are guys that are all pretty salty and accomplished, right? So I had maybe the fact that I grew up in Ames and knew a lot of these people, and that I didn't want to be that guy, right? I didn't want to be that guy. So it's like, you know, and even after you win, you got to, you know, keep that up a little bit. Not a little bit, a lot, all right? There's just a different level of pressure that you don't see today in that Iowa State program, right? Because of you know, our coach won 6 national titles, and I always say this is that Harold Nichols was Nick, as we called him. You know, after a while, you're not going against the 1 national title; you're going against the 6, and you can't do anything about that one year at a time. And I don't know if my whole experience here with that tradition was I knew what the tradition was, and I had high expectations of myself. I knew what the expectations were, and it was like, we're going to try it this as hard as we can. We were outgunned in a lot of ways as far as what the program was. And when Gable really had it rolling, I mean, you go recruit against Gable, and it was like, you know, you'd be there and you'd be talking to the guy and all that stuff, and you call back on the phone. Well, you know, Gable showed up, and it's like Dad came home. He's been it's like that scene with the truck driver and the little kid running to the truck driver that gets out of the truck. Dad.
But 87, I mean, Gable, they had the X put on their singlets. I mean, everybody
Yeah.
had anointed Iowa. It's a done deal. They're just got to show up, right?
Well,
So
I think this time period in '86 gave them the confidence to do that. And I disagree with Dan. He said, "Well, I shouldn't have never done that," and all that stuff. You absolutely should have done it, right? It's the fact that you put nine in a row together, and you threw the X on there. You don't get to the 10, all right, unless you had the 9, and you're paying homage to the guys who got you there. I like it, all right. I like that delusional confidence, and Gable comes back and said, "Well, we did, when I saw that, I had a poster just like the poster I'm giving you guys here. I had a poster of that. I put it on my closet. But if it wasn't that, I was going to put something else on my closet that would remind me and give me a reason to get up every day, right, and go at it. So I love the fact that they did that, right? And, our little fan base kind of that we had out there in the tournament that year probably, they had a circle through it, the X, which is fine. Those are good rivalry type things, all right? It's fantastic, okay? You'd love to see those days come back.
Yes.
But where people have the confidence to go ahead and do that. So I love the fact that he did that, not because it really motivated us all that much, right? But it's just, I think he should have absolutely done that. I guess I disagree with him sometimes, and he says that in front of Iowa State people, but I don't know if he really means it.
With people that you're promoting this duel, and there's people that out there that know the history of our sport and know the history of this rivalry. I was 2 years old when this happened, so I obviously was not there. But I grew up driving over to Ames. I grew up in Ogden, right, and sitting in that line, and
yourself a season ticket, man.
yeah. So like getting it, sitting in that line, like with my dad, I just got done farming, going over that duel, I guess. But like, so I'm trying to like, if someone watching this that is, just went to Iowa, Penn State last year, or they went to Iowa State last year, and there's that rivalry's a little bit back. They're not really. I mean, there's no wins for it, right? For Iowa State to hang their hat on, but like you can feel that energy when you go back to that duel. So I'm trying to like. Somebody that has no clue what the heck you're talking about, right? That maybe might be a sophomore, junior in high school, connecting that wrestler or maybe even younger to this era of like, hey, you watch this, like, because that's what's happening almost right now,
Tony. I would tell you this is that the one of the things that the takeaways from this has been, I think that this has an audience not only beyond wrestling, beyond the state of Iowa, but anybody who's ever had a rival in any sport is going to understand what's going on here. Again, when you hear these guys talk about each other reverently, in 35 years later, the single mother that is trying to help the sport, dad's not in the picture or whatever, and trying to get to help their young boys, understand, to grow in the sport like we know that the sport can provide. Sport can't be the dad, all right? But the bottom line is that, help them in their, get around a lot of positive influences. They're either teammates or whatever. They're going to, 35 years later, oh, I get it. This is why I want my kid out for wrestling. If it gets a guy to go ahead and consider to be an official 4 or 5 years longer, right? If it gets a guy to consider becoming an assistant coach for a little bit while longer, understanding the long-term impact that you can have with people through the sport, right? And, I'm going to do a broadcast with Ryan Warner from Change My Life. And I always gave him a hard time. He says that wrestling didn't change my life. I changed my life to be successful at wrestling, right? And that's what, when you hear these, I mean, I love his show, and he does a great job of not being critical of him, but I just give him a hard time about, what are we really saying here, right? A lot of these guys made a lot of significant changes in their life to be successful in the sport. That never changes, right? That never changes. You have to make, I heard Nick Saban say this one time, the Alabama football coach says, once you've decided to do something, goal like this, 99% of the decisions are already made for you. You've already made that decision because you have this goal. So I think anybody who's ever had a rival, Tony, all right, who was Ogden's big rival back then? Perry or whatever? Yeah. So you go down to Perry, you're gonna go treat this. But if you saw that guy 5 years later, you'd say, "Hey, dude, how you doing? What's going on?"
Yeah.
I really love going against you. Remember that match when this happened and that happened? I can't tell you how many times I've had those type of experiences at nationals, and I'm a little bit more fun position because I'm out there still doing media. But I hope that some of those guys that beat the heck out of me goes, well, I beat the heck out of him. All right, see that guy on TV? All right, I whipped his ass. All right, they'd be right. You know? So it's okay, right? It's okay to have a rival. It's okay to get excited about it. Okay to get fired up and have those nerves and that nervous energy and all that stuff. It just makes you better. And to not have that experience doesn't really have, and it could be a JV match or something like that. When you walk into a gym and there's a rival, you smell that popcorn and you smell that rubber mat in a gym, right? Let's get it on, all right? This is what it's about. And the whole, and I think you see that with the other big meets like Ohio State, Penn State, Iowa, Penn State, Iowa, all that, Oklahoma State, of course, in there. They want it to be big. There's nothing more sad than going to an Oklahoma State meet, right, and watching what used to be a great program, not have the wherewithal to make it a good match.
Yeah. It's kind of sad, but
well,
the rivalry,
the great one. We had a great match last Oklahoma State we did on ESPN was really a fun one. And Oklahoma State needed a pin to win, but
there's not the following the involvement. The rivalries petered out, you could say, fizzled out a little bit, just because
Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, or Iowa State.
No, Oklahoma State, just because there hasn't been that tension. Like it's kind of like, okay, Oklahoma State's going to win, right?
Yeah.
You obviously have a lot of. First of all, thank you for doing this for the sport more than anything. I think this is the kind of things that I've done. I think you've done a selfless job doing it. You could have took as executive producer. You could have took a lot of people maybe would have slanted the story. I think you're extremely fair, and I think you told both sides. The ability for guys to there's still some open wounds.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of also shows you that how important this was to a lot of people. There's a lot of people still have open wounds from 35 years ago. Maybe that match, Matt England you talk about, but there's a lot of things you've seen maybe happen there, advance in their life or further in their careers. What's some of the biggest, you obviously had a lot of learning, you're 26 at the time, and maybe it's not just then, but what are some of the biggest things you learned from your process of leading young men and coaching during your tenure at Iowa State that you still use applicable today in your life?
Well, I think I tried to get better at it, but I was a young coach. You say leading young men. Well, I was a young man, right? So I was kind of put in a little bit different role. But I think that we had success on the mat. I think a lot of guys got coaching jobs at a young age because of what happened for me. Okay, and maybe to the detriment of people that maybe put in a little bit more time and all that. But this is a sport where you just need the energy, right? By the time I was 32, 33 years of age, I wasn't feeling it, it was compensation and things like that, like having a contract. I was on a year-to-year contract probably, but those weren't the important things. Those weren't what drove us. Those relationships with those guys, it was just so fun to be in a college wrestling room. All right, I can't tell you. You get around a bunch of guys that, and I feel the same way about this project. When you get in a room and you go, hey, you know what? I think this guy's going to go ahead and be pretty good. He's starting it. The last month and a half of the season, he's been really doing what we expect him to do, and he can get away. He can do this. He can, and he's getting tough, right? And you're going, well, that's what I feel about this project. we're coming down to the last month and a half where a lot of people are going to see it and all that. And I go, I know how it's affected a lot of people, and I go, I think we've really got something here. But you don't know. You don't know if 1,000 people will watch it or 100,000 people will watch it. That really doesn't become as important as the fact that you did the work to put a good project together. And when I look at these guys that I coached, and and again, I was a young coach. Then I got married when I was coaching. We didn't have any children back then. I was living a totally different lifestyle than I am today as a father of 3 and 2 adult girls. Now starting having grandchildren. They're so it's just a different facet of my life. Again, that's why it's a time capsule. I just was trying to do everything I could to keep my feet moving, to be not necessarily immediately, because I couldn't be compared to either my predecessor, Coach Nichols, and my main rival, Dan Gable. But when you think about it, at the end of the day, Gable didn't have many rivals, and he certainly didn't have many guys that put teams up. That those pictures that you see of Dan going nuts in Carver Hawkeye, well, it's Brooks Simpson pinning my guy, right? Okay, I mean, he's as surprised as anybody could be, because that meet in 80, whatever it was, 88 or whatever, we had him, all right? We were up, but the bottom line is it didn't work out that way, but that's what's the great thing about having a rival.
Yeah.
And there's a moment in this thing that I'm on my team's shoulders, and Gable comes over to shake my hand. And I had that sinking feeling about, man, I wish I was off these guys' shoulders right now, right? Knowing what you know today and what he's accomplished, and it looked kind of it wasn't the I should have been, but we were excited. We hadn't beat him in a while, and we were going to Iowa City in 3 weeks and try to win a national title. And we were on, at that point in time, to answer your question, we felt like we were on pace, right? So now we just, we're on pace, and then we're going to rest up a little bit. Then we're going to go there, and we just couldn't get the pilot light started again. And with a few of our guys. So
Gable come over, shake your hand, knowing how his psyche works. Do you think that maybe he did that because he wanted you to know that he saw you there, acknowledge what was going on at that moment, or do you just think it was just natural just to shake it, to go up and say, okay, I'm shaking your hand, I'm acknowledging this whole situation at the time, I'm not just dismissing it, most guys maybe just walk away. No. Just how he works his motivation.
Well, I didn't certainly want to create any motivation for him. So
I know it wasn't intentional, but on his behalf.
No, I think he was,
shell shocked.
No, I don't think that. I don't think that at all. I mean, because you look at him in this meet, he's not demonstrative at all, right? He's a little bit subdued, and we talk about that a little bit. But again, we wanted to take him out, right? That's what a rival wants to do to somebody else. They want to take him out, right, and let the chips fall where they may, and that's what I like about what's happening in the rivalry right now with Iowa State. They want to win. I mean, I'm going to digress a little bit. Tom Brands probably still has it on his goal list that the Iowa State meet is the most important meet of the year, right? Makes his life a heck of a lot easier if he's able to go ahead and continue to win. And I promise you, Coach Stresser is thinking the same thing as well. We can get our fan base excited because we're going to beat Iowa, right? So it exists.
Highest table stakes.
Yeah, high table. So you're not going to. But I think that our guys went out and wrestled really well that day. You see some of these matches, and there were very few instances where we kind of didn't wrestle to our ability, but we showed up and we battled them, and we won some tough matches. We were in shape, and we, I think he just appreciated the fact that he's got that we are showing a lot of energy and some progress, right? And I got to tell you that one of the biggest. One of the neatest things that we were able to uncover on this, a couple names that you're probably, one you're aware of, right, but the other one you're not aware of. John O'Marks, Did you ever know about John O. Marks before this? John O. Marks was the recruiter for Iowa. Okay, Brad Penrith tells a great story in this. Okay, and about his recruitment. But Gable had a recruiting coordinator before anybody else considered it. I was a recruiting coordinator, but it was Marks was doing this in the '70s for Gary Kurtelmeyer. So we unearthed a little bit of that a lot of the average Iowa fan doesn't know. I mean, I knew John O. Marks. He was actually in Ames. In fact, a lot of people think that he had a lot to do with bringing
the spy, right?
He was the spy.
Brad Penrith came to Iowa for books only.
Yeah.
Really?
Big argument between. So anyway, we're not going to unearth that, but it's well worth. Second episode is well worth watching. Just as Penrith is fantastic in this thing, and so my wife's favorite is Greg Randall. He didn't really know what to expect, and all of a sudden he once he got on there, he was gold. All right, you make a case for him as the OW. We knew Royce was going to be funny. We knew
Royce is in a different light too. I mean, Royce.
Yeah. You see Royce.
Royce he was still a little bit humbled. I mean, he got beat pretty bad in this dual meet.
Royce is wonderful in this thing, and
see the other side of Royce.
Well, yeah, you see the guy I know, and we've actually become pretty close since then. So I think one of the things that again, it's so good to see the guys who won these matches show great empathy, and sometimes that they were being interviewed 3 states apart at different times. They throw great empathy for the guy that got beat and what that guy meant to them as far as a rival and how that drove them. And again, like we're talking 12 national champions in this group here. They were fun and they respected each other. And I think that that's really important too. But sometimes that just comes with over time and maturity.
Do you think like as wrestlers there's always that point in our career that we think about, like when we don't expect that we're going to think about it, right? Do you when you think that this docuseries of getting it out to the public and people are watching it and they get to understand it just as much as you do, right? Do you think is it going to be like a relief that people get to see it for you? Like, is it something that you think that you're going to be able to put past you, the athletes, maybe not you, but like maybe some of the hurt that you had from that season? It's just like, hey, I was able to we were all able to tell it, and now we can kind of move on? Or is it all, it's always going to be a part of your life, but do you get what I'm trying to say? Like it's
I think every one of these guys has moved on in some way, shape, or form. Yeah, they moved on from it, but they talk about it like it's yesterday.
Yep.
To just like you would when you talk about memorable matches that you had. I always tell people this: you always kind of gauge yourself I can't tell you how many times I had guys that walked up to me and said, "Well, I wrestled Gable in high school," right? Well, that's his memory of the sport. Gable goes on to have all this success. Well, he wrestled him in high school, and that's his connection to the sport. He'll always have a deep connection to the sport because of that he wrestled Dan Gable. Hundreds of guys have told me they wrestled Dan Gable, or were there in the practice room. They might have been in the practice room or with him at one moment in time, but their memories of they view themselves there. The other thing that we tend to. I told my daughters this one time, and I think it's really true. I tell them all the time. I says, you'll always remember yourself, your esteem. It's kind of like that. You hit that. They go to the fair and you hit that thing down, and it goes up so high, and and then it goes up a little higher, right? And it keeps on pushing something up there, and then that's what your highest was. Okay, that's what it's like with physical conditioning and your self-esteem. People will always remember themselves, right? Whether you put on a few pounds or whatever, get a little age in your eye or whatever, you'll always remember yourself esteem-wise at the highest conditioning level that you were ever at. Now, it gets you into trouble sometimes. Right? That's
a really good.
Yeah.
So it, and then that's what it was like for these guys. They're all part of national championship teams. They had several 44 All-Americans amongst the 20 guys. And I think about a guy like Matt Eglund who visited with us. This ended up being the last match of his career, all right? And things got tough for him and all that. But I can't. The year before, he was the reason why they won the national tournament. He was the 8th seed and gets into the finals, and knocks out the number 1 seed, Mark Perry Sr. Right. So it's like that type of that swing right there ended up being the difference between, first and second in a lot of ways for their program. And so he was one of the heroes that they had, and it's what happens in a career. We can't always decide, the way we go out and all that. But I was just so thankful that he got up and did this interview, and it's emotional. It's probably cathartic for him. And when you know the whole story, we take you there a little bit, but like I said, he's in every episode. And there's funny things that he brings out here about teammates and talking about Royce and like I said, the only thing that we could really worry about here with this thing, Tony, was, is it going to be good? Can we make a good story out of this? Not about we didn't have it. The 4,000 minutes of interviews took us to how we wanted to finish this, and it's the duel, but it's really more about the two, not that duel. Mm-hmm. There's 11 different story arcs that develop after the last hand is raised. But technically, with John Myers' connections, we were able to go ahead and get Stephen P. Arkle, who did the color for this thing. He's won 22 Emmys, right? Same type of heavyweight that did the final sound for this. If you ever look up YouTube, Coca-Cola, Andy Warhol exhibit, the Yessian sound people, Michael Yessian has done this. His company did the sound for this. Connections of John's in the industry. Wrestling people. Actually, Stephen P. Arkle's not. You'd notice that Stephen P. Arkle, Sparkle, and he's in colorization, and cool. He's 22. So he's actually an Australian, and there were so many things that, and his family started buying. Originally, he married a woman from Northwest Iowa, and they started. They just bought a farm while we were doing this. So there's an Iowa connection there. Yeah. And so anyway, we wanted to be the highest quality we could possibly make it, and John and I are the ones that shot it, and we got a lot of help from our attorney Dustin Miller, who helped us with the rights from Nyemaster. Chris McGowan from Siouxland Chamber of Commerce also helped us a lot, but the actual nuts and bolts of putting this together was the talent and dedication of John Myers and me trying to get everybody together.
I'm not gonna let you off the hook yet, though.
I got 3 questions at least here.
Keep going. I got time.
You and I talked about this offline, but you're 26, okay? And you just, I think a lot of times, especially in the sport of wrestling, you can go to football and other sports. Bill Belichick wasn't an all-star. Like, there's a lot of times just because you were a national champion didn't mean that you're going to be a great coach, right? So obviously you had the impact on your athletes. Your record speaks for itself. Your insight. What made you, in my opinion, how did you become a great coach so quickly? Like what did you do?
I don't think I did become a great coach so quickly. I think the other thing too that I learned real quickly is that I learned from watching my coach, Nick. He never. If you had 5 meaningful conversations with him during the course of your career, that was the over and under, right? Okay, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't like you. I mean, these guys, they talk a lot now. I mean, there's a lot that there just wasn't a lot of that back then. He was very quiet man anyway, and stoic would be the better way of putting it. But I learned from him, and I think Dan learned the same thing. You just got to be okay with not being the guy. I look at a lot of programs right now, and everything runs through the energy of one guy. Okay? When you think about that for a second, that's an impossible amount of wattage to be able to hold up or stay at that level. And I figured out that I got to be okay with allowing others to get the credit, number one, others to, head coach, I've got more credit for this than I'd ever probably even deserve over a lifetime. I'm a national champion coach. I mention it every time I come out to the broadcast. National champion wrestling coach. Okay, big deal. Well, what I did
It is a big deal.
Well, it is. It was a big deal to me. It was my goal. But here's the thing about it is that every coach that I hired had better credentials than me. Les Anderson, 2-time national champion, longtime coach. Ed Banning's Olympic champion, 3-time national champion. My brother Joe, Kevin Jackson. Maybe there's probably one coach I had that didn't. A couple coaches that I had were not as credentialed, but but they're good coaches. So, and I wanted them to take the credit. And so there's something magical that happens when you've got that young coach, that energy, that passion to help a guy get better, and combine that with the experience of a head coach that can kind of referee that relationship. Work your and it all started with we just had good guys that came to Iowa State to become champions that had been done there before, and we felt that if you did these things. I think there was a little bit more development back then because a lot of guys came into school a lot younger than what they do now, and they're a little bit. They may have not been developed as they had some things that were missing, but once that showed up, once the maturity and the strength and the right techniques showed up in their repertoire, they were able to go ahead and get better real quick. And nothing beats competition, right? And nothing beats whatever you do. I said this before. National champions, it's always going to be about who's the toughest guy. There's a lot of ways you can show that you're tough. We always talk, some people get enamored with the physical conditioning, the strength and all that stuff, the body, getting the best body and all that stuff. But you got to have the heart of a thief, man. You want to take something from somebody who's worked harder for that than you have. You're going to steal somebody's lunch money, and they've worked their butt off to get that lunch money, but you're going to take it. Right? Why? Because, like Saban said, you've already determined that you're going to be a national champion. So it's easy to steal somebody's lunch money because it's your goal too. We don't sit there and get on the scale and go, well, I wonder how much this guy's worked, how hard this guy's worked next year. You get on the scale and say, I'm here to win.
Yeah.
Right? There's an element of that, and that takes a tough guy to do that. And sometimes the delusional confidence is what you need, right, to keep yourself in that mind space, all right, so that you'll eventually do the work that it takes to get there. That's the most important thing, is that if I set that goal and become delusionally confident and willing to sacrifice for it, I'll do the work, right? Now the question is, do I have a good plan, or am I being taught the right techniques? But fortunately at Iowa State at that point in time, we were doing the techniques that work on Saturday night. That's what I believe is that, teach even the high school kids, teach them in junior high the things that you'll see on Saturday night.
Like today's coaching now compared to back then, and what you have to deal with kids is you talk about like believing in yourself and being delusional, and it's harder, I think, probably than ever to be in that one track mind. Being, because you have all these outside things on your phone of people commentating on who this wrestler is going to be, their rankings and stuff like that. I'm curious, Adam, like as someone that's is within a club, you got kids that Nolan's high level right now, and obviously you got kids at the club too. Is like, how do you keep that self-doubt that it's just always somebody's probably, it could be a simple thing as like you're ranked 4th, say in our rankings, but you feel like you're number 1. Like, how do you?
Actually, it's going to be a default to the question to Coach, because my question was going to be, his daughters have been super successful in cross country, right? So my question was going to be, you as being at coach your level, then you're a dad, but you're also a coach. How did you communicate with your daughters to be successful in their sport?
Yep.
Well, my daughter Grace was
unbelievable.
So she was a multi-time state champion and won like cross country in 4A, 3A, and 2A, and when we moved, and she ran. She was probably easily one of the top 5 or 10 runners in the state, probably at that time. And there's a lot of really good runners. And I remember having a conversation with her. I used to drive her to school from Perry to Dowling, and where she ran her freshman year, and it was kind of funny because she had 4'11", and she had size 10 feet. She's 4'11", kind of like 85 pounds, and we had her playing basketball all summer. She didn't distance run at all. She went out for cross country in 8th grade, and I was talking. I spend the time. We had about a 40-minute drive, and I spent time talking to her about this, and because she was. I called up the cross country coach, Father Kirby, and said it's August 3rd. I says my daughter just got in with basketball. He says, "What can she come and run for you guys?" And he goes, "Well, we've been running since June. All right, we've been having practices since June." I go, "Well, she's not a bad runner. You know, she's been in good shape and all that stuff, and been playing basketball all year, and she ends up going to the team. In the first few days, she's with the slow group, and then the next day she's with the little faster group, and then pretty soon she's making the team on a state championship cross country. It's no doubt they're going to win the state title that year. And Carissa Schweitzer, who was the Olympian and 5-time national champion, went on to have a wonderful career at Mizzou, was her teammate and all that stuff. So pretty soon she's running behind Carissa the whole time. And so as a dad, I'm looking through the rankings and the times and all this stuff.
Great.
All the girls are across the state and all this stuff. As I'm talking to her, I'm going. And one thing I observed at cross country is that you've got these kids that go out there too quick, right? And you've got the kids that all of a sudden the ones that bothered me were the ones that ran real fast in the last 200 yards. And you sit there and go, if they could have, because it's about, I mean, it's going to be painful, whatever you do in that sport, and you're going to finish strong. But I always think about, well, if you had that much energy left at the end of the run, what would have been happening if you could have done it 800 meters earlier, right? And I'd have this conversation with her. I says, if you're going to finish 5th in the state, let's do it by letting the top 4 runners run you down, all right, as opposed to you coming from behind at 10th and getting that up to 5th. So you're going to finish 5th. Let's go ahead and run with the best, all right? And, she had one of those wonderful races there where she's, Carissa was 20, 30 yards out in front of her, leading the race like she normally does. And then she, just had that moment where she got afraid of the people who were behind her catching her. And as a result, she passed Carissa, and the next moment we see her, she's, 30, 40 yards ahead of everybody, and she wins the state meet, right?
As a freshman.
Well, in cross country, in young ladies cross country, a lot of the freshmen and sophomores do really, really well, right? Because there's obviously with the body changes and all that stuff, it ends up. And we didn't know any of this stuff. We just happy that our girl won state title.
Absolutely.
I call up my mom. I says, Mom, Grace won the state meet. And my mom goes, my mom is, so from 1975 through 1985, 11 years, right, she watched his son in the state finals or the national finals or both for 11 straight years. And she goes like this. She goes, so this would have been, she would have been like 75 or so. She's 85 now. No, it would have been like, she's like 70. She goes, well, it's about time. We haven't won anything in 11 years or whatever that was.
That's great. That's great.
And then my mom was not prone to bragging or anything like that. It was just about time.
So when did you see, was there a moment in time having those discussions you saw the switch turn in your daughter's mind? That she started
she was so
not like,
raw.
Oh, yeah, Dad.
Yeah, she was so raw, and I don't know how much it was, but we'd have these, conversations, and she won the district as well, and it was really weird because Carissa went the wrong direction, following Carissa was always ahead, went the wrong direction, and ran down basically a rabbit hole, but it wasn't on the course. They lost sight of the gator, right? Right, and she ran down the wrong way, and so Grace followed her, and a girl from Valley followed her at districts. This is over in Council Bluffs, and she came back, and Carissa panicked and started running as fast as she could, right? And Grace was like, it's just all of a sudden, and Carissa got too tired at doing that, and I think it bothered her a little bit, and then she almost stopped in the race, And Grace ends up winning the district because she just kept her composure. It just that's so much a part of it. So I had that parental experience with my daughters, and my oldest daughter went to West Point, where it's equally as proud as her, as going to the military academy and being one of the 9% of women who graduate from there. She was one of the leaders there, and a lot of it was because she just I don't know, I raised them to kind of be tough, just I had a wrestler's coaching mentality about all of it. It didn't always work out really great, but you'd be in there telling them something, and you'd flip wrestling in there instead of basketball. You'd say, when you're out there wrestling, you're not out there wrestling. You're in track, right? So your mind changes.
What would your advice be for a dad has either a young kid or a kid in high school, how to manage a relationship so it doesn't become...
It just can't be about you, right? I already told just that my brother's going through that with his son, Colby, and he says, Colby, I've got my arm raised as many times as I'm ever going to get him raised. So it's not like the one thing you recognize, and I think all these guys that experience success and had kids, and it can't be about you, because it wasn't about your parents when you were doing it. So I think the parents that get, our dad was as active as any parent could be back in that era. He gave us a lot of opportunities to go see a lot of the country and wrestle other competition, and went to Western regionals, went to Eastern regionals, Central regionals, and went to Olympic trials when I was a junior. That they got to be, went to the camps up in Okoboji with Gable and Peckham and Martin, and so we had a lot of opportunities to be good at this, and but he was really methodical in the way he approached it, but he asked the guys. We lived in Ames there. He'd always ask, well, what does the guy need to do? And the constant answer that we got back is, you need to lift weights and you need to drill. That was we drilled a lot. And I remember one time I went to wrestling camp when I was in 6th grade with my brother Tim. We came back, and he says, well, what'd you learn? Well, I learned how to play cards, right? Because I was in a cabin with a bunch of older guys. They were playing poker, and I learned probably a lot of things I didn't need to learn. Right? But I was around these guys, around these great wrestlers and all that stuff. But, I didn't come back with a great knowledge, because I saw it, I did it. The next year, we showed up with the notebook. Took our notes and all that, came back, and that's what we drilled on, and retaining stuff. That's the biggest thing I see, and one of the biggest things I see. And I worked with some 4th graders and Perry when my daughter was in 4th grade, so she's 30 now. So I always talk about having the type of techniques that work on Saturday night, and the parents would get so bored with what I was doing, right, with the repetition and the detail. But that's what you got to do when you're trying to finish a shot. Just to get a kid to go ahead and not get scored on is a good deal. And so I think in wrestling, we always want to show everybody what we know as coaches, right? Not the fundamentals that they can go ahead and rely back on, because Gable said it best one time. I was on a broadcast with him. He says, the higher level you go, the more it becomes about your fundamentals. If you don't have those fundamentals down, right, you crack and break, but if you have your fundamentals down, all right, and little simple things like good penetration, good setup, and not getting scored on, and then it becomes about, then you can make it less about the wrestling and more about the competing.
Got it.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And then where I'm going to, you see where those key matches that where some guy breaks or what happens, is because it becomes about the competitor. It becomes less about the wrestling.
I really like that, because majority of, say, just the state of Iowa, we've got all these little youth clubs out there, right? And it really kind of puts in perspective you hear some coaches say, hey, we're going to show you a lot, and hopefully you pick up 4 moves, But you really should focus on those 4 moves, right?
Yeah, but once you turn it into being less of a clinic and more about you see like when John does his low single. I mean, he does you understand the concepts of it. So when somebody gets really, which low single changed wrestling for 30 years, Smith's low single. So that becomes about you can show all the variations and all that stuff, but it's really pretty simple. What he's really looking to try to accomplish, and you get better at explaining that with age. But I was talking to Royce one time, and he was telling the story about Gable right before he about to wrestle Andre Metzger in the Midlands finals. And if you've ever been around Royce and Randy Lewis, he's going to bring up Andre Metzger quite a bit because Royce beat Andre and Randy had a few matches where he didn't. So whatever, it becomes a
one-upper.
One-upper, right? So, but he said Gable came up to him and says, well, nobody's ever won any big matches wrestling. And I think that's what he's talking about.
Wow.
It's just all the big matches are won because they're so, you're locked in there. It's the competitive piece of it, and I think that's what for the longest time has separated Gable from, you take a look at the way he really coached in the beginning or as an assistant coach. I mean, if you just did what he did, if you just became kind of one of his disciples, right, you were going to get better. Because there's no way, because he taught people how to spend more time at it than anybody else. Those early Iowa teams were spending more time wrestling than any other program, right? The volume, and we had another conversation one time. I called him up on I-80 one time, and I just said, Coach, I just want to pick your brain for a little bit. And I was in a practice one time, and I was watching these guys, and it was in October. And they were doing 1 minute goes. All right, well, 1 minute go, blow the whistle. They go out there, shake hands, they get it, and all of a sudden, 30 seconds go by. One guy gets on a shot, there's a little scramble going on, all that stuff. Okay. And I go, it's October, right? You get in the room, you roll around, and you go. And you may take 2 or 3 breaks or whatever, but you just go, all right? And I go, it just really bothered me because you can build your basic conditioning that way, but you can also just find things out about yourself and also begin. But with a coach with a whistle in October, right, standing over guys doing deal, and I go, and he goes, he had the perfect summation of it. He says, yeah, I start seeing some of that stuff too. And he goes, isn't it amazing that the guys that when they're coaching, they do the things that they did when they got there, not the things that got them there. And when you become a clinician or whatever, and you want to teach these kids all this stuff, well, what did you know when you knew a double leg or switched to your single leg? My college roommate Perry Hummel, I mean, NCAA finalist his freshman year, we used to give him a hard time because the setup to his double leg was his second double leg. Boom, 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 got it, So there was no setup. He just shot a lot, and he never got spun around, right, against some of the best wrestlers. I mean,
do you think coaches do that because their ego comes in play? Or
I don't know. I think that a lot of times you can kill these guys with conversation.
Overthink it?
Overthink stuff and all that. And I'd rather see stuff be approached after practice or you gotta. There's one thing about going out there and going for an hour and a half. Take 2 or 3, 4 breaks. Hour and 20 minutes. That's a good practice. You may make a lot of mistakes and all that stuff, but I like the roll around wrestling that they have whatever they call it, spar. They're not really sparring, but they're
play wrestling.
They call it play wrestling. Yeah. We used to call that just rolling.
So you're not a big believer in the whole thing about like just guys being. I mean, guys are 26, so wrestling says maybe their body's a little bit shot, but you still believe in the setting the base earlier in the year. Like you still need a lot of mat time.
Yeah, I think you need a lot of mat time. So I think it's a sport where okay, we're going to come in and we're going to do 2 or 3 matches or whatever. We do that stuff at the last. I one time I pulled my team aside, And it made all the difference in the world, I think, in the way I coached. And I said, you know what? We are trying to kill you guys with all the things that we know, right? I said, for the rest of the year, and this was in late January, and then we got beat by Oklahoma State. It was down in Oklahoma State wrestling room. I said, for the rest of the year, rest of the season, we're going to work on these 4 things, right? And then the rest is going to be you guys wrestling. But the 4 things we're going to work on is, your go-to shot, right? Down third, you've heard me say this on air probably 100 times, but your go-to shot, down by 1 with 30 seconds left. How are you going to ride a guy for a minute? Now, for some guys, one of the things that I had a guy that I think it was pretty obvious the guy could make the finals and all that stuff, but hell, the only reason why, but he could never he wasn't able to take the guy down. So we spent a lot of time, doing what the rules allow you to do, is to go ahead and, guy is just barely out on a stand-up and you shoot back in and you finish the takedown, right? You do that 6 times, you got a minute of riding time. You get out in 3 seconds, all right? So getting out in 15 seconds, riding guy for a minute, and great defense on the feet. With head here, head here, head here, head, guy shooting in on a leg. And then on top of that, we'd shoot some sort of ace in the hole if you're down big, What's your ace in the hole?
Now your co-host or your partner on Big Ten Network, he would say, "But Jim, what about mat returns?"
Well, he's correct. All right, that's how you continue to ride a guy. So the thing about, I go, in this, obviously Shane has seen this. He's in it, by the way, right? He makes a cameo. It's the mat returns are a big part of the game. I mean, what are you going to do with 20 seconds left? You just going to let him up and think you're going to take a good guy down again? No, it's just easier to go ahead and compete with him, but you can't try too hard to get reversed, right? So I'm a huge believer that if I was in a room today, I would be coaching guys big moves from the bottom position. Side roll, stand up. Don't stand up to get an escape. Stand up to turn and throw. Be Andrew Alvarez where he stood up and whipped around, leg lace, and go. There was no better time for risk reward to go ahead and do that. That's why I appreciated that whole sequence there, because it's one of the things I've been talking about, is that one of the easiest ways to take a good guy to his back is from when he's trying to ride you. Mm-hmm. Right? And you've got way too many guys who just want to just get an escape and that's it. Well, then you've got to be the best guy on the feet. And so I would look for nothing more than my big moves from the bottom position. I would try to big move them for 30, 40 seconds. And after a while, you know what they're going to do. They're going to let you up.
Yeah.
They're going to let you up anyway. I don't want anything to do with that. Well, that's good. All right. It's going to give you a quick escape. But be dangerous down there. And that's one thing I learned from wrestling Randy Lewis. Holy cow. I mean, after a while, it was like control everything and push his hips away. I was kind of a takedown, let him up guy, all right, on that, because if you tried to ride him, it was going to be trouble. He was going to take you to your back. And guys got in trouble because they clinged onto something and off of a single leg or something like that. You got to hit and get out, all right? And don't even try to ride him. But that's what so some of the things you end up coaching aren't necessarily, your coaching has to evolve and not necessarily be the things that you did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's hard to kind of, know that it worked for you, but it might not necessarily work for somebody else, right? So I think that's hard as a.
It can work for there are basic things that you've got to go ahead and I took over the room when it came to getting out of the legs. I really that was such an important part of becoming. I found that a lot of guys would become cowards on the feet if they gave up a takedown, and then gave up a takedown and then couldn't get out. So they'd stop shooting. Mm-hmm. They stopped try to get that takedown. Mm-hmm. They become defensive wrestlers, and all of a sudden they're in more 3-2 matches than you could ever dream to be in a season, and they weren't progressing. Why? Because they'd come out of freestyle where you try to become like a sheet of plywood, and you don't understand the concept of getting out from underneath is getting back pressure into the guy, and when the guy pressures back into you can take that pressure and move. You can do the same thing from your feet. Back pressure into the guy. Well, you don't do any back pressure. you see in the internationals, they're starting to switch a lot more. They're hitting the switches, right? And but you got to have some back pressure. But if you back pressure in freestyle too much, well, they're just going to roll back over. It doesn't make any sense. But I think that position has helped our guys internationally learn how to compete. I think that we're putting guys out there that are long in the tooth, but know how to compete. Mm-hmm. And where did they learn where did they learn that?
Folk style.
Yeah. So I mean, I love watching freestyle because it's got the best athletes. To watch some of these guys.
Folk style is hard.
Folk style is hard. It is.
Everyone wants to try to avoid the hard.
And you don't see a guy. You don't see many foreign-born wrestlers do very well immediately in folk style wrestling. It just becomes too hard.
So, when is the when's the official debut to the public, and how can they watch the duel?
Well, you can follow us on theduel.org. All right, we got these upcoming screenings here. We're excited for next week because we're going to Waterloo on the 17th. The one on Waukee is going to be the 18th. All right, so Tuesday and Wednesday of next week we'll be doing screenings. Once at the Dan Gable Museum, we're going to do episode 3 there. That's going to be great because you can have Royce and Bill Tate sit down together, and it was just an epic match. But it's even better to see these two guys sitting next to each other. The world needs a lot more Bill and Royce. Mm-hmm. And on the 18th, we're doing the screening in Waukee. We've got about 18 tickets left for that as of today. So that likely will be sold out. And then we go the 4th to Sioux City up there for a night with Dan Gable. And that's going to be a fundraiser for the museum up there at Sioux City and the Sioux City Chamber of Commerce. And then November 15th and November 17th, we're going to Iowa City at the Hilton Garden Inn. There'll be another episode 5 Gable-centric showing, and then episode 1 at Ames at Jack Trice Stadium in the Sioux Cup end zone, which would be a lot of fun. I think we can get about 400 or 500 people in there.
And then when can they watch it? When will it be live online? Like for people that can't.
We hoped we're in the final with the QC quality control of the different streaming platforms: Amazon, Google Play, Apple Plus, YouTube TV. I think there's a couple others there that we're going to be able to stream on. We hope it's going to be available in mid-November. It'll be about $2.99 an episode, which is their lowest price point. And then sometime after that, hopefully before the Iowa State duel, the whole series will be available for $9.99. So, we the other thing that needs to be mentioned here is that you can follow us on theduel.org, like you see on this little. We go in this direction here. There we go. Theduel.org. All right.
Don't be messing up my hat.
Right. It's not. It's got this hat I gave you's got my signature and Gable's signature on it. So
make a hell of a YouTube.
So I gave it to Gable. He signed first, and then I put mine on afterwards. So and then we also last thing that I'd say is we got those. Gave you a poster here. We got this. That's the duel, and so my man John has done a great job of doing all these things and on social media, and we're trying to get people to watch this one soul at a time. It's been a unique journey here for us, but we've become good friends and closer friends than we actually were to begin with. So if that was possible, but I guess how you follow it here is that the one thing I wanted to mention is our foundation. So we've paid for this. We are set up a foundation, so we get about $3 or $4 with every sale of that, and we're going to put those dollars into a foundation. A lot of these guys were very they're still involved with the sport, helping out with youth, and we set up a foundation to help promote and support amateur wrestling in the country. So that could look like a lot of things. It could look like there's a lot of pretty good media people that we've seen here. Pin Doctors has been really helpful with us to get some exposure here. little collages they've been doing on that. We're thankful for all that. But there's some entities that we want to help support in this in the rest. So we just don't know where it'll go. But hopefully, people find some value in it, and we're very proud of it. And like I said, it's like one of these guys that you coach that you all of a sudden got really good feelings about, and go, this guy has what it takes to do it. I think what we've done here is noteworthy. I'll just give you an example. You guys watched The Last Dance, and you know that Michael Jordan was sitting there with his laptop, right, and he had a cocktail in it. You can tell we're not on Friday afternoon here, but with you guys, with all these beer cans here, right? So anyway, yeah, there you go. Gable Beers has been our sponsor. Yeah, and they're gonna come out with a cardinal and gold, black and gold, and red, white, and blue can for Gable Beer, and so we've been collaborating with them, and on that, and so anyway, one of the things that you'll never have seen before. John's background is special effects, like so he inserts things into the screen, and so on the laptop, when you're watching one of us look at it on the back of the laptop, you can see what we're watching.
Got it. Yeah.
And you've never seen that anywhere.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, we call it Scony Vision, right? Because we got a guy out in New Jersey named Fransconi, right? That he snuck in and helped. We didn't know he was watching this, but he thought that was really cool, so we named it after him.
There you go.
Scony Vision. So the so there's some things that you'll probably see later on when after people watch this, they'll go, "Hey, that was a good idea." So wouldn't you want to see what Michael Jordan was watching?
Yeah.
Instead of looking at the back of the laptop, well, my man John put it on there. So we're really proud of the technical part of this, and like I said,
you guys did it. You guys
it was a
homegrown
kind of
type
2-man operation to some degree, and I tell you what, the first time I watched it, I was shaking. I was like, I hadn't, I go the first episode I did it just John, he edited it all and wanted me to look at it, but before I watched it, all right, I had to get someplace by it myself, and I was nervous.
Yeah.
This has become such a big part of what we've been doing for the last 3 years. So this I don't think I've been more proud of anything I've been able to do in media. I know I'm not. This is it. And after you've done the 4,000 minutes of interviews with these guys, there's it was like you made weight. Let's go. Right.
Yeah.
We're finishing this out.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
For giving that, and thanks for coming today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming on and telling a little bit of people that don't know the history of that, and going to watch these screenings. You can.
There's so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so much.
I feel like we could have a much longer show going
we'll come
into
back
each episode. I think once everything airs, I'd love to have you come in and have you kind of have like a director's cut type of why this got.
Well,
this
when you
way,
see it, Tony,
'cause
which is when you get a chance to see it, you'll get a chance to see the first episode coming up here at our Waukee screening, but you'll have a lot of that'll spring a lot of stuff, and maybe we can have a conversation about all that. So
perfect,
right?
Perfect. Sounds good. Well, check it out, theduel.org.
Yeah.
Theduel.org. That's what they got their information on. They got the screenings on there. There's lots of different links. The trailer is on there. The trailer is on there right now. So
300,000 people have seen our trailer.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So
we will we'll reconvene, and all this is going to be all the hype up too.
Yeah.
Is all going to go down. Basically, the hyping up the Iowa State duel. That's going on. The end of November. So I'm excited for that hype to be back.
Yeah.
Thanks for your time.
You bet.